Grace and peace. Welcome to Judah's Roar Domestic Violence Awareness Initiative YouTube channel. I'm your host, Apostle Cheryl. And before we get started, I'm going to give you a few seconds to check down here below the video, down there, okay? And make sure you subscribe if you've not done so already. And then be sure to click the bell so that you receive a notification every time we upload a new video on Sunday evenings at 4 p.m. Central Standard Time. All right. Also, we've begun producing animations, and so make sure you check those out here on our channel as well. Feel free to share any video that we have on our channel on all of your social media platforms. That's one way that you can partner with us in our quest to end domestic violence. Okay, so today's topic is going to be animal abuse or pet abuse and domestic violence. We're going to take a look at how those two things may be connected. All right. Now, when abusers use violence as a way of controlling their partners or other family members, this violence or the threat of violence may also be used towards the family pet or the family animals. All right. Pet abuse is a coercive control tactic that is frequently used by abusers because it is potentially psychologically debilitating for the victim. And it's a demonstration of what could happen to the victim if they don't acquiesce, if they don't submit to the unreasonable demands of the abuser. All right. And so a home that is impacted by domestic violence is an incredibly stressful environment. And often a family pet is a source of comfort. Um, and it's very affirming because our pets are, they love us unconditionally, right? We have a bad day, they don't hold it against us, et cetera, et cetera. And so there's this constant nurturing and loving that can be returned to the pet owner by the pet. All right. There is unconditional positive regard. In recent years, we've come to understand just how powerful and how impactful the human and animal bond can be in a situation like that. And it's very powerful. It can facilitate healing emotionally, it can facilitate healing from a physiological standpoint. The power that's embedded in the animal and human relationship um, has been pretty well documented in recent years. And so you have all of these therapies, right, that involve pets, that involve animals, equine therapy with horses. You have emotional support animals. You have therapy dogs, and then all kinds of animals and pets can be utilized to encourage healing both emotionally and physiologically. Sadly though, sadly there is a persistent connection between pet abuse and domestic violence. Pets within the family are often threatened, harmed, or even killed as a means of the abuser, as I stated previously, maintaining, first of all, obtaining, and then maintaining control over the household and the relationship that they have with the primary victim. Um, and there seems to be a significant connection between the adult animal abuse and perpetration of physical and severe psychological violence. Okay. Survivors are not only concerned about their well being and the well being of their children or other vulnerable occupants of the household, but they are very, very concerned also about the health and welfare of their pets. The bond with the family pet can be very powerful and enduring, right? For many, a pet is an extension of the family unit itself. And so it's like having another child or having another sibling or, and so they occupy a very, very important role. And so anything that we hold that dear also often doubles as an area of vulnerability for us. And so when you care about something that deeply, and when you connect with something that profoundly, you are naturally concerned about its welfare and you feel naturally protective of it, okay? So, because of this, because of all of this that I've shared so far, the presence of a family pet in the home can impact a victim's willingness to leave an abusive situation. Okay, it's very very hard because oftentimes they feel like they're abandoning uh, some entity that has returned their love and has been loyal to them, and they feel that they're abandoning them, knowing full well what the abuser is capable of. A victim may delay leaving and elect to endure abuse for a more extended period of time out of concern for the pet's welfare. And a victim who has sought shelter elsewhere, at a domestic violence shelter or at a friend's home, may return to the abuser, um, out of concern for the safety and the welfare of the pet that was left behind. Now, years ago, there weren't that many viable options for victims who needed to leave and who had pets. They weren't welcome at shelters. And so, as I said before, a lot of times that they would refuse to leave because they didn't want to leave their family pet. And so, although there's a ways to go, it's better than it used to be. Unfortunately, animal welfare and domestic violence shelters are more often working hand in hand to ensure that the household pets have a safe place to go in the event that the victim elects to leave. Now, let's talk about some statistics. These are like mind blowing. Up to 71% of domestic violence victims with companion animals reported that the abuser had threatened, injured, or killed the pet or maimed the pet, in an act of revenge and to gain psychological control. Up to 71% of domestic violence victims with companion animals reported that the abuser had threatened, injured, maimed, or killed the pet, in order to gain psychological control over them. 41% of intimate partner violence offenders had a history of animal cruelty, and that's based on reported cases. And so I'm pretty sure everyone has not reported it, right? But 41% of domestic violence abusers had a history of animal cruelty. Now, what does that tell us? It tells us that if an individual has a history of animal cruelty, they're not that far off of harming an actual human. Okay? Animal abuse is one of four risk factors for committing domestic violence. So, what does this mean? This means that if you meet someone and they're sharing their deepest, darkest secrets with you, and they tell you they killed a pet when they were small, or they used to tie things to cats' tails, or they used to harm animals, kill animals, frighten animals, maim animals. Um, don't excuse that as, oh, well, they were young and this is what they did, okay? Because studies are bearing out that having a history of cruelty to animals is a risk factor for being abusive towards people later in life, okay? Now, so one risk factor is animal abuse. One is not completing high school. Another is having mental health issues. And then there's drug and alcohol abuse. Okay, so those are four risk factors, um, for someone going on later in life and committing, domestic violence. Okay, animal abuse is now recognized as a sentinel event, a red flag event, and part of the continuum of family violence. Okay, and so we're smarter about these things than we used to be. We're more knowledgeable. There have been many, many studies done, and much information has been collected. And so we understand now that when we see that in a family, even if you have this going on in the home and you've not been aggressed against yourself, just know that the likelihood that that will happen is very real. That is very real. Okay. Animal abusers silence the victim oftentimes with threats of harming a family pet because it's psychologically abusive. Okay. It demonstrates what can happen to them, as I said before, if they don't comply with the abuser's unreasonable demands. And so, in this sense, the pets become a pawn used by the abuser to acquire and maintain control. Some of the ways that this can happen is animals can be taken away, allowed to escape, okay, intentionally, sent to a shelter that's a kill shelter, a shelter that they know euthanizes pets after a set period of time. And this is used to intimidate the victims. In some instances, the child or the adult victim may be forced to harm or kill the pet themselves. And then individuals who commit pet abuse are very likely to become batterers. Individuals who commit animal abuse are very likely to become batterers. Okay. Um, I can tell you from a clinical perspective that oftentimes people who engage in these behaviors, even when they're very, very young, go on to become batterers. They go on to become, in some instances, murderers, in some instances, serial killers. Okay. So it's very concerning. And so what I want you to be mindful of is if someone shares with you that they have that in their history, is absolutely a red flag. It's absolutely a red flag. Okay. Um, According to the Animal Legal Defense Fund, abusers of animals are 5 times as likely to harm humans. Abusers of animals are 5 times as likely to harm humans. That's according to the Animal Legal Defense Fund. Some other ways that an abuser may use a pet as a pawn in their relationship and in their quest to dominate the household and to dominate and control the victim. Um, Stopping access to veterinary care. If the animal becomes injured or harmed, not permitting the victim to seek veterinary care for the pet. Impeding their ability to spend money on the pet for basic needs, foods, medications, shelter. Okay, um, refusing to allow pets to exercise or to get fresh air, threatening to harm or kill or get rid of the pet. As I said before, allowing the pet to escape intentionally, abandoning it along the highway, insinuating that the victim will be accused of abusing the pet. And so there have been cases where the abuser may report the victim to animal control and say that the victim is harming the pet or not providing for the pet, thereby triggering a response from animal control to remove the animal from the home. Okay, so they may do things to cause the animal to be removed from the home. Um, Refusing, if it's a dog, for example, refusing to allow the dog to come in when the weather is inclement, when it's extremely, extremely hot or extremely cold, and the pet is barking because they are uncomfortable, because they are miserable. Okay, so then what happens is you have neighbors complaining about this pet. And then that same sequence of events is triggered where now animal control can be called and the pet may be removed from the family. One piece of information that I wanted to be certain to leave with you is this, that the Animal Welfare Institute, or AWI, provides a zip code searchable database of about 1,400 safe havens for pets. The Animal Welfare Institute, okay, provides a zip code searchable database of 1,400 safe havens. And I mention this because if you're in a situation where you need to exit now or you plan to exit later for safety reasons, this can be part of your safety planning where you check into this database and try to locate a place that can provide shelter for your pet. And so I'm suggesting that you include this as part of your safety planning mechanism. You can find this information at awionline.org. 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 So, what have we been talking about? We've been talking about the connection between pet abuse, animal abuse, and domestic violence. 41% of intimate partner violence offenders had a history of animal cruelty. So, that is a red flag for sure. It's a red flag for sure, along with all these other behaviors, okay? If they have a pet and you see them abusing their pet, or if there's a pet in the neighborhood and you see them um, being mean or being abusive, not caring for them, not providing for them, um, it's a red flag. And it's not something that should be dismissed or chalked up to behaviors that they engaged in when they were growing up. So, what have we been talking about? We've been talking about the fact that as sad as it is, it's important to note that there is a persistent connection between pet abuse and domestic violence. That sometimes having a history of pet abuse is indicative of almost eventual um, domestic violence within a relationship or within a home. Okay, so it's important to know that when you see that, that's a red flag. And it's kind of a foreshadowing of what can happen to the humans that are connected to this abusive individual. Okay. Um, we want you to remember also that pet abuse, the threat of pet abuse, is psychologically abusive. Even just the threat of it is a psychological control mechanism. It's a coercive control tactic that's used to cause the victim to feel that they have no option but to submit to the abuse that the abuser wants to mete out. Okay. And so understand that that's the case. And then be careful not to dismiss animal abuse behaviors and minimize the importance of them and how it can foreshadow domestic violence. Now, usually you say pet, you think dog, right? Cat, um, bird, maybe fish. If you have kids, it might be a turtle or whatever. But even in rural areas where maybe a family lives on a farm, the animals that could be threatened could be the animals that live on that farm or live on that ranch. Okay, so this is not just limited to a household pet per se, it can be any animal. Okay, and what makes it a valuable target for the abuser is the emotional connection and the care and concern that the victim and other household members have for this pet or for this animal, whether it's a dog or a horse, whether it's sheep or a family cat. Okay, it's the emotional connection, it's what it represents to the victim. The lifeline that it represents to the victim is what makes it a viable target for an abuser. This is Apostle Cheryl with Judah's Roar Domestic Violence Awareness Initiative. And I hope that this video has been helpful to you. And I hope that you have a better understanding or that it's refreshed your memory about some things that you've already um, learned and understood about the connection, the persistent connection between pet and animal abuse and domestic violence. You be safe out there. Blessings to you.